No one special, but special enough that he's going to bring this amazing topic that is the power of the word. Marcelo Medeiros is a journalist and works as a producer for a Brazilian TV network. He was raised in a Catholic family and joined Spiritism in the 2000s. He has been a practitioner at Inner Enlightenment Spiritist Society for 7 years and assists with all their work in terms of media and communications. Tonight, Marcelo will combine his journalism knowledge with Spiritist teachings to explain how words can be used as a powerful tool in our daily lives. So we'll pass the word to a dear friend, and we'll talk about an hour, a little bit over an hour if possible, and then we'll go directly to our questions and answers if you would like to ask a question. So, Marcelo, please.
This one, it's working. Yeah, it is. Thank you so much for the kind words, and thank you all for inviting me to be here. It's always a pleasure the second time I'm here, it's always a pleasure to see all of you again. Some of you I saw also in the Spiritist Symposium last year. And for me to talk about to join the journalism, that is my profession, and the Spiritist teachings is a great pleasure. One of the things I like the most is to combine all these teachings that Spiritists bring to us, to our daily life. That's something that we all need to do, and for me to use it with my profession is always very important for me. And in this picture, we can see that's a typewriter. Today, that's something that we don't use that so much, but I used to. I didn't use it as a journalist, but I used to have one of those at my home in São Paulo, in Brazil. So many of my homework, my essays during the time I was at school, I used to use a typewriter to write them. And that's something very interesting. I was thinking about that right now before we started the meeting, that today it's so much easier because we just use the computer, and by using the computer we can delete the words. If we want to change everything that we are writing, we can just delete and write it again. And when we use a typewriter, we need to think twice or 3 times before we actually write something. So we need to be more aware of the words that we are writing. And that's important because that's something that we are going to see, how important it is for us to think about the words that not only we write, but the words that we say in our daily lives. So I think in the past, by using those type of machines that we had, we used to think more about what we are going to say, to write, to do. Today it's so much easier to do some things that later on we can regret. And so that's also one of the things why it's important to remember the machines we had in the past. So when we're talking about the power of the word and how we can combine the Spiritism and the Spiritist teaching with that, first I brought here, so let's go to the beginning. So one of the ways we see since the beginning is to see how the Bible tells us, what the Bible tells us about the beginning of the world, or at least the way they show us how was the creation. And if we read the book Genesis, one of the things they say, they start saying how God created all the things, and they say, and God said, let there be light, and there was light. So it seems so easy for God just by saying that, let there be light, and there was light. So it's important because it's a way for us to see that God, just by like using those words, these words, His words, He could create not only light, but the oceans and all the animals and everything that we have around us. Of course, we know that it isn't exactly what happened. It's just like a way for us to understand how God works and how God creates. But it is important because by seeing that, we can have this notion of the supreme intelligence of God. And we can also see like God by being the first cause of all things and the willpower. So if we just take a look at this book from this first words from the book Genesis, we can see how we can have an idea, at least this first idea of God, not only God creation, but of all the God's attributes that we have. And just by seeing, like, if they are saying that God could create just by saying some words, it means that the words, they have this willpower, they have this supreme intelligence. Those words could represent God. And as we all are co-creators in the world, so if God can create with the words, it means that we too, in a certain level, and according to the level that we are, we are co-creators, so we can create a little bit of our world, of the world where we live, with the way that we talk, the way that we write, with what we express from ourselves. And now if we go to the beginning of the gospel, if we go to the gospel according to John, it's very interesting because John doesn't start his writings with how Jesus was born or talking about Jesus himself, but he goes a little bit back and he also talks about the beginning of the world and about the creation. So he says that in the beginning it was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. So like the same way that of the teaching that we see in the Genesis, we find it here saying by John the Evangelist. So John uses this way to start his teachings, to start the story of Jesus while he on earth with us, by expressing, by talking about the creation itself. And here he goes, like if in the Genesis we see they saying that God would say this and that, here John goes a little deeper. He says that in the beginning was the Word. So what was he trying to say with that? If we go to the root of the word, or how was it meaning, in some versions we can also say verb instead of word. In the beginning it was the verb, and the verb was with God, and the verb was God. So if you go to the Greek root, it means logos. So you can find that the word actually means logos. And here we have Heraclitus, who was a philosopher came before Socrates, before Plato. And Heraclitus was one of the first persons who used this word logos and gave a different meaning of it. So he would say that all entities come to be in accordance with these logos. And when he used this word logos, he was talking about the reason, about the divine principle itself. So if we see that, and Heraclitus, he came before Christ, so he came before John. So at the time that they were using this sentence to talk about the gospel, to talk about the first teachings, the teachings of Jesus, they used to use the word logos as a synonym of reason and account and of the divine principle itself. So we can see how all those things are connected. So if you think about this divine principle and we change the word to divine principle, we can see in the beginning was the divine principle, and the divine principle was with God, and divine principle was God. So we can see that the word, the way that we use the word is the divine principle is the supreme intelligence itself. And also if we see this meaning from the Hebrew, if we see the word in Hebrew, it can also be used the word davar, which is also a synonym of intelligence. So in both of them, if we see the Greek and if we see the Hebrew, both of them, they use the word as a synonym of the intelligence, and if you see about the supreme intelligence. And now going to the Spirit's book, so we saw a little bit about the Genesis, and then we jump to the Gospel, and then we go now to the Spirit's book to see the first question out of the Spirit's book, and when they say, what is God? And the answer that the Spirits give to Kardec is, God is the Supreme Intelligence, the first cause of all things. So you can see that both of them, the three of them, they are talking about the Supreme Intelligence. So in the beginning was just God, was the Supreme Intelligence. And by seeing that, we can see that by God, just with the God's will, everything could be created. And at the same time, if they compare God's will or this willpower with word, we can see that the words are also a willpower, not only to God, but for ourselves. And every day we talk about around, the researchers say that we talk around 15,000 and 30,000 words every day. That's a lot. Some people a little more, some people a little less, but that's the average. And if we can also use those words to create, use those words to create things around us, imagine how many things we can create and we are creating every day around us. So it is important for us to see those information just for us. Now it's just the beginning for us to think about how important it is. So the word is important. It's not only a way that we use to communicate ourselves, to express ourselves, and to talk to one another, but it's a little deeper. If we are going later to see what we can find behind the ways that we communicate. So it can be a little deeper. It can be more powerful than we think. And now here, I went a little back to the cavemans, just to a little joke here. Oh, he knows how to talk. We are not speaking right now. Just to talk about, of course, I'm not going that back to the cavemans, but just to talk about this research by the University of Reading in England. The researchers there, they made this, they researched 23 what they call ultra-conserved words that survived for 15,000 years. So they wanted with that to see if some words that we use today in our daily lives, where they were created, why, when, and so they could go back to other roots from other words, from other languages, and they went back 15,000 years and they found like a language that was used at that time, that it was the first language that later on was like would progress to the language that we have today, to English, to, for example, to Italian, to Portuguese, to Spanish, so to many others, and they found those words, and among them there were you, I, fire, man, mother. And what they wanted to see with that, they said that if we could go back, like if we could have a way to go back 15,000 years, and if we could use those words to communicate, let's make this example. All of us here, we go back in time, and we arrive in a place 15,000 years ago, and we wanted to communicate to the people, with the population of that time. And if we use those 23 words, that's a high chance that they could understand us. For example, if we say those words, you, I, fireman, mother, and among others, we could at least have a conversation with them, because those words, they changed a little bit, but not that much. So they were like the sound and the way that they used to say that, it's very similar to the way that we say it today. For example, if we see the word mother, we have mother, we have mãe in Portuguese, we have madre in Spanish, in Italian. So it's not very different one from the other. So it means that we have the same root, and then they just change it a little bit. And why is important for us to see, like they have today, they say one ancestor to 700 contemporary languages. Why is it important? Because if we see like the power that a word has, And if we think about the word mother, for example, and if we here, we've been using, because we know that they didn't say anything about reincarnation, but we as spirits, we believe in reincarnation, we study reincarnation, so probably if we go back 15,000 years, some of us, we were there here on earth using those words. So those are words that we have been using for many, many, many times, many, many, many reincarnations. And each word that we use, it has a power. It has not only a meaning, but a very powerful message within it. For example, if we use the word mother, when we say mother, it's not only mother that comes to our mind. To each one of us, most probably it will come our own mother. When I say the word mother, it comes my mother to my mind. And with my mother in my mind come all those feelings that I have for her, all the situations that I spent with her in my childhood, in my adult years, until today. So if we see how we have been using those words for so many years, imagine that baggage that those words are here with us, that we bring with each one of those words with us. So it is important, if we see this research with our spiritist eyes, to see that we have all those feelings behind each one of these words that we have. And just one example, if we use again the word mother, it's very important because in the spirit centers we have mediumistic meetings. And many times in the mediumistic meetings, when we have like the mediums that channel some spirits, usually suffering spirits, that they go to the meetings to receive help. And if we go there and if we are going to help the spirits, many times are very tough spirits, those spirits that cannot forgive some persons that have been seeking revenge or trying to harm some people, someone. And many times it's very difficult to talk and to try just by using reasoning to convince those spirits to try to change the way they are thinking. And many times it's very important if we just, in the middle of the talk, we are, okay, but is there someone that you used to love, someone that is very important to you? And many spirits say, no, I don't want to talk about my family, I don't want to talk about anything. And when we ask about the mother, many times we can see completely the change of that spirit. Like usually it's the time that the spirits like collapse. Yeah, good word. The spirit collapses because all those feelings, all those memories come back. So this word is very important. So we can see that for each one of us, and it depends to each one of us, because each one of us, depending on on our bringing, on the way that we have lived, each one of us, we have some feelings attached to each word that we say. And I'll bring a little bit to the theory of communication, to my field as a journalist, just to explain a little bit how it works when we communicate to each other. The very simplest way that we study, the first diagram that we study at college when we are studying communications is this one here, that we have a person thinking about something to say, in this case is a tree, and the person thinks about the word and codify that word, that I have this message that I want to send, for example, a tree. So I codify that to a word, tree. I say it to another person. This person will receive this word, and it will decodify and have that image again, the tree, so we can communicate. That's the way, that basic way that we communicate to each other in our daily lives. But this is the theory. We can see the same tree in one place, the same tree on the other place. But when we see the practice, what happens, for example, I may have this tree here, and I may have someone saying this message, trying to give this message to another person. And then I have someone listening to that boy, that little boy, saying tree. And maybe for that person, the tree is not the same tree that the boy was thinking. So not all the time the message that we give to each other is the same message that the person is going to receive. So that may happen many things around there. There may, for example, not only the same tree that I think is the same tree that you think. Not all the time if I say a car, the car that's going to think about is the same one. So not all the time the message that we give is the same message that we receive, and there may be many different things around there happening. But just if we see with the physical eyes, according to the communicators, that's what happened. But what about now coming to the Spiritist teaching? What about in the spirit world? What happens when we talk? So I brought here the lesson from the book Workers of the Life Eternal by the Spirit André Luiz, a psychography by Chico Xavier. And in this book, right in the beginning of the book, there is a passage that they are in this place called Sanctuary of Blessings. And it is a place that they explain that the spirits, they usually go there to stay there for some days before they come here on earth in some missions to rescue some spirits that are here on earth. So imagine like we are going to a trip, we are going to another city, and before going to the city, we need to go to this place, we go to a building, for example, and we stay a little bit in that building while we prepare ourselves to go to that mission. And one of the things that the guide of André Luiz tells, not only him, but all the group who is there, he said that one of the most important things for them is to take care of the words they are going to say. He says that for them to be prepared, they need to say some elevated words and be aware of what they are going to talk, the topics between those days that they are there, so it will not change the vibration of the place. So it won't interfere in the preparation that they're doing there. And here what he tells André Luiz. He says we must choose and order our words carefully so as to create an environment that is favorable for the service intended. What is said creates the environment and has a defining role in the success or failure of a mission. So here again, he's talking about what is said creates the environment. So if we go back again to the lessons from the Bible, in the Genesis, and John's Gospel, and in the Spirit's book, we see again here that as we saw that God used the word, like is a way that we see that he used the word as to create, as a way to express his willpower, and we have it here too. So according to what is said, we create the environment where we are. And here they say to André Luiz that 90% of the institutions here on earth, of elevated institutions here on earth, 90% of the time, people don't use the words wisely. Like 90% of the time we are using the words that we are not supposed to use. And for that not happen there, they have a machine. I don't know if we could call it a machine, but they have something called a vibration meter. And so this vibration meter can see the vibration of the words being used to aware everyone if they are not doing what they are supposed to do, if the vibrations of the places being like deviated from how it was supposed to be. And many times I think it would be great if I could have one of that at work, at the Spirit Center, at home, in many places. Imagine if we are talking, and many times, I don't know about you, but many times, usually we gossip a little bit, we say some things that we didn't need to say out loud, and imagine if we had a machine here that would just like buzz very out loud. Okay, now I know that that's something happening, I need to change what I'm talking. And what he explains to Andrea Luiz is that the Word, the divine power, can act as co-workers in our action. So now he completes like that equation that the Word is the divine power, so it's the divine power that we have within ourselves. All of us, we have this divine power within us. So with the Word, it is a way for us to express this divine power, and it acts as co-workers in our actions, like we are creating the environment around us. So not only we create, for example, in that example about the tree, not only we create the tree, when we think about a tree, we are actually creating that. We are sending those messages around us, not only when we say, many times only by thinking we can do that. So those words that we use, that we think, that we say out loud, that we write, we are co-creating with them. And here just a diagram for us to see when we speak, what happens when we speak, just like a basic as well. We have this air pressure that comes from the air from our lungs, and we have the vocal cords and all the articulators. We have our tongues, we have our lips, the teeth. That's what helps us to talk, to create the vowels, the consonants, and to create the words and to be able to talk to one another. And Emmanuel, in the book Seara dos Médiuns, I don't know if it is translated to English, I think it is not, but he compares, as we have here in the picture above, we have the mouth, we have our vocal cords, and he compares that the vocal cord is like a live harp, and saying that this live harp, like it is playing a sound that this expresses our soul and our thoughts. So it's saying that all the thought that we have is actually an expression of our soul. So by seeing the thoughts that we have, it's like seeing ourselves, like we cannot hide ourselves. And that's something that you always say, that we may hide ourselves here, but we cannot hide ourselves to the spirits that are around us. They can read us, they can know how we are, what we are, and truly the way that we are. And so Emmanuel compares like the spoken words that we have with the expression of the soul and the expressions of the thought. And by that, he also explains that it can work as a magnet. And he says that we always express our mental shadow or our mental light. So we cannot hide how we are. And the speech also shows the moral group we belong to. So I put this image of the magnet here because it's like the same way that we can attract. We attract with our words, with our thoughts, like people that are similar to us, ideas that are similar to us. For example, today with social media, for example, it's so easy. We can follow people that think like we think, and many times if we have someone on Facebook, on Instagram, on Twitter that we are following, and we start thinking of some speech or some type of things that they write that we don't like, we just go there and unfollow, or we block. We can mute those persons because it's like, okay, I just want to be around people that are like me, people that think the way I think, that feels the way I feel. And Emmanuel says that the same thing happens to our speech. The speech shows how we are, and we are attracted to people that think the same way that we think. And this way I'm going now a little bit to my field again, to journalism, and talking about this magnet and how we attract each other and how we are attracted to things that we like or we do not like. Does anybody here know or what are those kids, those yellow kids here? Never saw that. Those kids, they were from 1890s newspaper, because it was happening a newspaper war here in the US. Newspaper war, when you say about that, it's like some newspaper wanted to see which one can sell more, has more readers than the others. And in the 1980s, we have this little boy here. It was called The Little Kid. It was a cartoon, was created at the time. And first, this cartoon of the little boy, it was published in the New York World. There was a newspaper published here in the US, in New York. And this yellow kid was very famous at that time. So it stayed a couple of years in this newspaper, New York World, and then it began to be published in the New York Journal. So it was in the late 1800s. And what was the characteristic of these two newspapers? The two of them, they were very sensationalist. That means they use some headlines and some text that they wanted only to attract the people to read the newspaper. So they used to sometimes to exaggerate in the news. They not lie, but not fake news, but express the news in a way that could be not that clear, that reality that was expressed there. So as these two newspapers, they used to have this yellow boy, the yellow kid, actually the name of the cartoon, they started to be known as yellow journalism. So the journalism that they practiced, this sensationalism, was known as yellow journalism. And so sometimes they could also manufacture some news, and they had these eye-catching headlines to sell more newspaper. And so until today, it is used among journalists, this expression, yellow journalism, as a way to sell more news. And why it is important? Because we can see until today, for example, when you have in the beginning of the 2000s, this Ebola, it was like something that was happening in Africa, and there was at that time one person who came here to the US that was contaminated with the virus, and there was like the fear that the virus could spread among us. And one of the newspaper of the time, he had this headline, Ebola is coming, like this, with those red words, and it's like blood coming from the from the cover, and they say here the US had a chance to stop the virus in its tracks. It missed. Okay, the US had a chance, but it missed. So by reading that, we say, okay, what can I do? There's no chance I'm going to be contaminated by the Ebola. We all are going to die. So it's something that just by reading that headline and by seeing that, it brings fear to all of us. So those words that can be used to express fear to us, to make people fear and to make people be afraid of something that we don't know if was going to be reality or not, but by those headlines, we probably think it is going to be. And the whole population can be affected just by seeing that. But at the same time, another newspaper brought this other message, this other headline to us: the Ebola scare in the city. So the man was tested for deadly virus at the hospital in New York. So the disease unlikely, but doctors don't know. And the test results looms as New Yorkers wait in fear. So if we see one of them is saying that the US had a chance to stop and it missed and the Ebola is coming. The other one says the disease unlikely, but doctors don't know. So like it's the same news that the two newspapers had a chance to inform us, and each one of them is sending a different message or is selling a different message according to what they want to sell. So it's important for us to see that just by using those words, imagine if I see one headline if I see the other headline, one of them I say, okay, I go back to Brazil right now because I don't want to be infected. And the other one, okay, we can be scared, but it's not that dangerous as it could be. Maybe it's going to be in the future, but I still have time. I can stay here very calm. So they can change the way that we feel, the way that our vibrations. So, and as we saw in the other slide about the magnet, and each one of us will be connected more to one of those headlines, depending of the way that I am. If I am a person that is very easily scared, that is very easily to be out of control, probably I will see both of them, but I will believe in this one here, the one on the left. So how the words can be used in a positive way and in a negative way, and how many times we are unaware why we connect to one to the other. So it's also something very important for us to see what reactions that we have, what reactions that it brings to us, and what can we do to try to avoid to be affected many times by those headlines. And now we have another example. This one is more recent, about the earthquake that happened in Mexico in 2017. And we have here, there was this huge earthquake in Mexico City, and all the headlines at the time, you can see they were talking about the rescue of a girl that was found in collapsed Mexico City school. Her name was Frida Sofia. So it was breaking news everywhere. It was, if I'm not mistaken, the second day of this earthquake, and they said the director of a school, according to a newspaper, the director of a school said that there was a missing girl that was in the school when the earthquake happened, and nobody saw that girl anymore. And someone said that the girl was there inside, still in the building, so all the rescue crews were there. And I remember on that day I wasn't there, but I was working in New York, but I was watching that, and I called my mother, and my mother was watching the news in Brazil, and she was talking to me about that girl. She said, I'm here watching the news, and I saw this girl, and I'm so anxious because are they going to find her or not? And she had been watching the news for half an hour, and they were only talking about the rescue of that girl, if the girl was alive or not. And my mom was feeling so sad and so bad that I said, Mom, turn off the TV. It's not good for you. And many times I've told that to her, because many times I call her in the afternoon and she's watching some news. They're talking about some violence and some crimes in Brazil, and I always tell her, don't watch that, because I know how she is. She is very worried about the violence and about the others, and especially where my brother and sisters, they are my nephews and my niece, if they are out there, if something may happen to them. I always say, Mom, don't watch those kind of news, those kind of sensationalist news. And in this day wasn't even those TV shows, but all the newscasts that were talking about that. And I said, okay, turn off the TV, go see something else, because it's not making any good to you. And in the next day, what happened? We found out that that little girl, Frida Sofia, didn't exist. So it was something that nobody knew what happened. Who is Frida Sofia? Everyone in Mexico, not only Mexico, but all over the world, was shocked by seeing that. But actually, I think it was one person, one newspaper that wrote that name and wrote that interview that never happened, and all the other newspapers started to share that news. And it was a fake news. And so if we imagine we were talking about this, how these words, they can create, what they create. So imagine all that feeling that it created around all over the world, because my mom was watching that in Brazil. I was watching that here in the US. It was actually happening in Mexico. So, do you want to change the switch? Sure. That's good. No problem. Working? Yeah. Okay. So imagine how it was, how many people around the world was connected to each other by that feeling, by the fear of what was going to happen to that kid, imagining if that kid was alive or not. Many people were praying to Frida Sofia as well. So, and the girl didn't even exist. So it's important to see, because today we are talking a lot about fake news, and it's something that in the last few years we've been talking a lot about that. And if we go to the Spirit's teachings, we can see that not only is something very actual, but Kardec was talking about fake news as well. This text from Kardec, I found in the Spirit's Review in September 1861, and Kardec is saying this. The readers who might have heard about it, actually he's saying, I just brought this sentence, but I'm explaining what he's talking about. Kardec is saying that there were some newspapers at the time that were saying that Kardec and other spiritists from that time were doing some conferences, some going to some places to give lectures, and it was not happening. Kardec didn't know how they got those news, why they were spreading those news, but Kardec says that to us, the reader who might have heard about it, about those lectures, those conferences that Kardec was going to give, should be informed that not everything printed is word from the gospel, even if it is in a newspaper. And in this case, it's just a canard or a hoax. So imagine that in 1861, Kardec was talking about fake news. And not only talking about fake news, but Kardec was a victim of fake news. And if we see, Kardec talks about that in the Spirit's Review. If we go to the Gospel according to Spiritism, we have a whole chapter that Kardec talks about the false prophets. And the false prophets, we can say that at the time were the fake news at that time, because they could go and say some teachings that would distort some teachings from Jesus or bring some revelations that were not truth. And if we go also to the Medium's book, the last part, one of the last lessons, the last part that we have from the Medium's book is Kardec teaching us to see if a message is also from a good spirit or not. So it's very interesting if you read, because he brings some messages to us, like that he received through some mediums. We can read that message without knowing if it is a real message or a fake message, and later he gives us, no, this message is actually from this spirit, or this message is not because of these and that reasons. And we actually have two messages. There are one or two messages that were signed by Jesus. And by reading those messages, we can see, like just by reading one time, we can see that Jesus didn't write them. So it's something that, like those fake news, we can be a victim of fake news in every field of our lives, not only by reading the news or watching the newscast. Talking a little bit about the spoken word, because as we saw in that example, we had that Frida Sofia, not only her case was in the newspaper, but also in the newscast. So like a spoken word that was out loud around us. And Leon Denis, in the book Spiritism in the Arts, he brings to us many different examples of art that we have, and he gives this comparison. He says that art is a way for us to express, to be connected to God, and the art can express God's thoughts and God's love and God's will. And among many different kinds of arts, like he talks about music, about painting, and he also talks about the oratory. He says that it is an art. So he talks about the speakers. And he himself, he gives an example. He says that he was a speaker, and he says that many times he said that many most of the speakers, when they are talking, they are connected to the invisible world. And it's important that he says the invisible world. He doesn't say with the benefactors or with the good spirits, because we know that we can be connected to the good spirits, to the bad spirits. As we saw, we are a magnet, so we can attract any spirit that thinks like we think, and many spirits that want us to send a message that they want us to send. And according to the way that we prepare, the life that we live, we can connect to different kind of spirits. As Paul of Tarsus used to say, we are surrounded by a cloud of witnesses. So we have spirits all around us. So it's up to us actually to be aware and to see with which levels of spirits we are going to be connected. But he says that, Leon Denis says that the speaker can use their physical organs to spread or not what comes from God. So it's very important when we say here speaker, can be also a speaker, like at his time it was a speaker giving lectures. But today, when we think about the technology and social media, anyone can be a speaker. We only need to have our cell phone and Wi-Fi or a connection, and we can go live on Facebook, we can go live on the YouTube, we can record a video and later on send that video to any person that we want. So all of us, we are speakers. All of us, we can be a speaker. So it's very important for us to see that those speakers, any of us, we can use our spoken word to express what comes from God or not. And the same way that Kardec says that we need to be aware of the false prophets, we need to be aware of the messages that we receive, we need to be aware as well of the messages that we receive today, because today is very easy for us to watch a video, a short video, a long video, no matter the length of the video, and to share it. And many times, for example, I have some different WhatsApp group, and I receive many videos every day. And I have also some groups of Spiritist group on this app, the WhatsApp, and from different, for example, from different meetings that I have at the center. And every day I receive around like 4 or 5 different videos. I confess that I don't have time to watch all of them, because many times they are 1 hour, 1 hour and a half, and I would like, it would take like 5, 6 hours of my day to watch all the videos. But it is important for us to see, like, not to believe in everything that we receive, and not only to believe in everything that we receive, but to think twice before sharing something to others. The same way that we need to, it's good for us to think twice, as I was saying, the example of the typewriter, that I can write something. When I use the typewriter, I needed to think 2 or 3 times before writing, because it was very difficult to delete something. We need to have the ink, or before having that white ink, we need to have like a little paper that we would put in the paper and type the same word again, so we could erase that. It was very, very hard. And the same way when we share something, after we share, it is there. Anybody can have access to there. After we upload a video to the YouTube, anybody can go there and watch. And Joana de Angelis, in the book Happy Life, she gives an example that she says that the words are like arrows, that once we throw it, we cannot go there and take it back. So once we throw the words around us, anybody can catch those words. It's very difficult for us to go there and to retreat ourselves, yeah. And is the Aesop, the philosopher, that in Greece he also used to say about the tongue. The Leon Denis says that it is according to what you do with it, the best or the worst. So according to how we use our words, to how we use our speech, it can be used to the good, can be used also to harm others around us. And now, after seeing all those examples and all those things and the importance of the word, so how can we use the words wisely? How can we do that? That's we can go also always to the examples that the spirits bring to us in the spirits book when Kardec asks about the model that we have here on earth, and the spirits say that watch Jesus, meaning that the best way for us to know the example that we have for any field of in the life that we have is to watch Jesus. And if you go again to John the Evangelist in his gospel, he was talking, so I said that in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Later on, in the same chapter, chapter 1, John said, and the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. So like he was saying, in the beginning in the creation was God, was the Word of God, and now he was saying that the Word of God became flesh. So we had the Word of God here with us. We have His divine presence here with us, here incarnated on earth, and that was Jesus. So what can we learn with Jesus? What cannot we learn with Jesus? That would be the best question. But here, regarding the Word, we can see some examples. Like here, also in John, Jesus say, I am the way, the truth, and the light. No one comes to the Father except through me. And he says, therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on the rock. And what can we say about hearing Jesus' words and the word that we have from him? As Jesus used to say, Jesus meant, for example, Jesus used to call during his days God as a father. And many times he used to say, my father, your father, our father. And he used to say that he and his father were as one, like meaning that he and God were one. And by that, many religions, they believe, for example, I was raised in Catholic Church, and in Catholic Church, I was taught that Jesus and God were one person, like we have, like God came here and was here among us as Jesus. But when we see in Spiritism, we see, no, God is the one who creates everything. So Jesus wasn't God. And what Jesus was saying with that he and his Father were one, is that Jesus was connected, totally connected to God. So the words that Jesus was saying to her were the words from God, like his idea, his examples, because Jesus is a perfect spirit. So by being a perfect and elevated spirit, he's doing good all the time. He is love all the time. He feels love, God's love, and he expresses God's love. So that's what he meant when he said he was the way, the truth, and the light. Like to go to God, for us to reach God, let's see Jesus' example. Let's see Jesus' words. And Jesus, for example, Jesus, if we read the book Jesus in the Home, I love this book. And we have 50 lessons, I think in that 30 or 50 lessons, I think 50 lessons in that book. And in all the lessons, it always begin, it is in the gospel. They're doing like a gospel at home in Simon Peter's home. And all the time, like it starts, most of the time they start the chapter with the disciples talking about some topic. So we see all the disciples talking about some topic. And then Jesus allows everybody to talk. And later, we just see, like they say, Nélio Lúcio is the spirit who brought this book to us. And Nélio Lúcio says, and after all the disciples talk, Jesus waits a little bit, like meditates, takes some time, and then starts to talk and to give the lesson to the disciples. So we can see that even Jesus being Jesus, he didn't talk. He wasn't the first one to talk. He didn't talk without thinking, even though his words were the words from God. So if Jesus didn't do that, why many times we go and say things without thinking. That happens to me all the time. I say something and then I regret. At the same time, I regret what I said. And just by seeing Jesus' example, we can see, okay, I need to meditate at least a little bit without saying that, because many times, especially when we are in the heat of the moment and like in the discussion, most of the times if we say something at that time without thinking, we are going to regret that. So just by seeing Jesus' example, we can learn so much about the way we use our words in our daily lives. Then we go to the book Genesis by Allan Kardec. And Genesis, Kardec is going to explain to us this passage from the Gospel according to Matthew, when Jesus says, "Heaven and earth shall pass away, but my words shall not pass away." And Allan Kardec says that Jesus' word will be true for all time, especially because, as we just saw, Jesus' words are the word from God, so he's connected to God all the time, so it cannot be something fake, something false. It is true because it expresses God's law, and God's laws are immutable. So if God's laws are immutable, the words that are connected to his laws are immutable too. They are true for all time. And he says, since Jesus' mission was to bring God's thought to humankind, only his pure doctrine can be the expression of that thought. So it is very important, for example, when we were talking about the speakers and when we talked about books and about many things, especially also in the Spiritist field, when we talk about Spiritism, one thing is for us to say, okay, that speaker was saying this or that thing. I learned it by listening to that speaker, by listening to me here. But, okay, but is that speaker saying that something from him, or is this his or her interpretation of the teaching, or are we talking about the teaching itself? Because you know that the teachings Jesus brings to us, they are true, but many times the interpretations that we have are not. So if you see all the Christians' religions, they have the same teachings. They have the gospel, but each one of them, they are going to bring different interpretations from the gospel. So we cannot mistake by seeing that the teachings are, and the words, they will be true for all times, but it doesn't mean that the interpretations that we make from there are true all times, because we can each time see a different reality there. One example I always like to say that is when you talked about the parables. Jesus brought many parables to us, and he used to tell parables as a way to bring his teachings to not only to the disciples, but to everyone around him. And until today, we study the parables. And for me, every time I read a parable, it's like I was reading that for the first time, because I see different layers there, different teachings. Sometimes I don't understand a parable. Later on, I can understand. And even when I think I totally understand a parable, I read it again and I find something new. And so the way that I see that parable can change, but the words itself, the teaching and the lessons that Jesus brought to us, it doesn't. It's just my eyes that are changing through all this time, as we have been changing the way we see for the last 2,000 years. Because if we have learned from the beginning, that we wouldn't need to have the Spiritism today, because Spiritism is here especially for that, for us to see again through different eyes the teachings from God. If all humanity had understood the teaching since the beginning, okay, we would be in another place today. We would be a world of regeneration, a happy world, something like that, and not a world of trials and expiations, is still in this transition to a next level. And here we almost getting to the end of the lecture. I brought this again from the Happy Life by Joana de Angelis. And Joana de Angelis says here, I have this microphone here with so many good words coming from that. because Joana de Angelis says, a kind word generates stimuli and values that turn into precious results. Words have lifted up civilization just as they have driven multitudes to war and destruction. Use words to rescue, encouraging those who have fallen to get back up, those who are asleep to awaken, those in error to correct themselves, and the aggressive to calm down. Speak with elevation and kindness, and make yourself a faithful microphone in the service of goodness. So if we see here, we can see that she's talking, for example, when she says, words have lifted up civilization and driven multitudes to war. The same way we can use, if we see the speech that Leon Denis said, the same way we can use the speech to elevate people, to help people around us, and we can use that to bring war, depending on the way that you use the speech to persuade people to do something that's not according to God's law. And also we can see here what calls my attention here, like she is also saying that we can use the word as a way of charity. If you are using the words to rescue people, to help people around us, we are using that as a way of charity. If you think here in the Spiritist house, we have the fraternal assistance. The fraternal assistance is a moment that we receive people that are in need to talk, need to receive any kind of help. They come and they have this moment, sometimes in some places half an hour, 45 minutes, to talk and to express what they're feeling and to receive some words that can help the people to calm down, to find some solution or at least some light in their lives with the teachings that we have here from Spiritism. So many times just by saying hello or good morning to someone, we can totally change the day of that person. So words are very powerful, and many times we have no idea how just a simple hello, good morning, good afternoon, see you tomorrow can be of so much help to a person. And here, just to finish, I love Peanuts and I love Snoopy. And in this, Charlie Brown is almost sleeping, and he says, sometimes I lie awake at night, and I ask, is life a multiple choice test, or is it a true or false test? Then a voice, like could be his spirit guide, comes to me out of the dark and says, we hate to tell you this, but life is a 1,000-word essay. So imagine if my life were a 1,000-word essay, what kind of words, what those 1,000 words I would find, I would take to write that test about my life. So that's, for me, like the voice, we can totally say it was some friend of, he couldn't see that was talking to him, as always giving him some elevated ideas. That's it. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you, Marcelo, for all this amazing information that we received tonight. Many times we cross this topic here at the SSB, and we haven't had a chance to take it as deep as you did tonight. So thank you for that, and thank you for all the information that we can take it home and actually multiply with one another, right? I would like to give us some time for some questions, for some discussion about this, and Marcelo will be answering, and we already have some hands, but tonight I'm going to change. Usually I pass the microphone for someone to ask a question. I'm going to ask the first question. Usually always like, who is supposed? And obviously with this whole thing, Marcelo, of what we get and what we don't get, where we get from and how do we get from, and I'm talking about information, with the social media today, what I would like to ask for you to give us some hint, since you're in the field, to your hands-on on what's fake, what's not fake, analyzing sources, analyzing what you read. I know it's very easy for us to go to one of the social media and say, oh, I saw this there. Don't do this. Live by this, live by that. So what are your at least 3 steps or ways that you would analyze some kind of information that we come across, that we can live better, that we cannot fall into the temptation to say that that's true or that's false, or be like your mother when she was pretty, worried about the little girl that didn't exist. So what would it be? At least 3, or if you want to say more, that would be okay too.
I think the first one would be exactly what Kardec says in the Medium's book. Like, see, first, even though we have that signature of Jesus in the message, Kardec goes and analyzes to see if this really Jesus or not. I'm saying that because many times today we have some people that they go there and they can pretend to be like a CNN, to be an ABC News, NBC News, and it is actually fake. So we can see that image in the social media, in the Twitter or Facebook, and we think that message is coming, that news is coming from a reliable source, but it is not, because people, they can create like websites very identical to the real ones. They can sometimes change a little bit the address, and we don't notice. Or they can just put a picture of many times that happens, they just put a picture of the news and not a link to the site, nothing like that, like it's a print screen. And it doesn't mean that it is from that source. So I think the first thing is to see if it is really from the source or not. And also I always try to see, as Kardec, like the messages that he received to the Spirit's book, he would receive messages from many places in the world, and he would compare to see, okay, I received that teaching, is just this medium from this place that is giving me that message, or do I have any other medium in any other place that will give me the same message, so I can see, okay, I can rely in this teaching because it's coming from many other places. And it's the same thing if I see some news from one place, and even though it is a reliable one, but is this the only place that is giving me that, or do I have any other place, any other source? Because sometimes, as today, all the newspapers, all the websites, they want to be, and the newscasts, they want to be the first one to give a news, like to have this breaking news. Many times the journalists, they don't have time to really see if that is true or not. If they have some information, they just want to give that information, so they will have more readers and more clicks online. So, okay, if this site is giving this news, let me check if another one is giving me the same news now or in the next like 10 minutes, 30 minutes, because usually even if we have breaking news, it's very unusual that just one news place gives that news. Usually it may be the first one to give, but later on we have from other places. Because if we actually see one and believe in that, maybe later on we see that that person was mistaken, and we will be spreading like fake news, even though we think it is a good one. And what else? And also, and always, if we think something is very, very awkward, it's something that, okay, no way it can be, I can believe in that. That's okay. Let's not believe in that until the last moment. If it takes me one day to believe in something that is outlined, like in the case of that kid, all the news were saying that. Okay, but let's see. Let's wait a little bit before being desperate about something. Maybe it's going to change. Let's give a little time to see what happens. Yeah.
All right, Alba.
Thank you, Marcelo, for bringing this beautiful word. Since words, even the spoken or the writing ones, are the tools that we use as humans to express our thoughts and ideas, right? That's basically it. Usually when we are thinking, we think in images, but also we are using language, like a self-talk or things like that. So what it will be the impact of these words in my mind, the impact in my life, and maybe how I will be connected with the spirit world? It's like you brought us the words that we express verbally and writing, but what about the ones that are in our mind?
Yeah, just by thinking, just by having it in our minds, we are already creating. It is like we saw it, we are co-creators. We don't need to verbalize, to say it out loud or to write. Just by having those words or those ideas in our mind, so we are already creating that. That's why many times, for example, if we are feeling sad and we just think about that sadness and about negative things, and we do not change the way we think, is we are just going to be each day more down, each day more in the blues, and it's difficult. Many times it's difficult for us to change the way we think, but it's not because a person is not saying something that it's not thinking something. You never know what's happening inside a person's mind. So if it's happening to us, I think the first thing is to try, but it is this thought my thought, or maybe I'm receiving this from a spirit here that may be trying to influence me or not. And even though it is my thought, if I'm the one who is having bad ideas, let's try to change that. So I think that maybe reading an uplifting book, uplifting message, listening to some kind of music that for me is good to better my mood. So I think that just by having those thoughts, it is already creating, and we are already connecting with the spirits. They are in the same vibration as we are.
Next, Daniel.
Thank you, Marcelo. This was a very good information you brought to us. My question is, in your research for this talk, did you come across any example or information about using words as a healing process? Like, I know that there is as a tool to heal someone that is sick. It's just a curiosity.
Yeah, there is a good research from, I never remind his name, is Naruto, I think. The one who made a research with like water, and like we could like put some classical music to some water, any other kind of music on to send. He has a Japanese, Masaru Emoto, yeah, that's the one. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Yeah, he has a very good research about that, like by sending some words to the water, and later on he would frozen the water and to see in the microscope the different crystals, and he would see like beauty in the water that he sent good words, and how awful the other water's words. So the same applies if we think we are like I don't remember, 70% of our body is made of water, so the same can apply to us. If we have those thoughts, if we say some good words to another person, we are maybe helping the person in the healing process. Yeah.
All right, one more question. Yasko.
The way you said you put all this information, I feel we are more and more living a time of very dangerous. It's a very dangerous time in terms of miscommunication. Because first we don't see everything is very fast, like you said. You used to type very slowly. You have to, and before we had to put in the mail. It leaves time for me to rethink if that letter that I wrote is reasonable or not. I could give up before I send to the mail. But nowadays, today I was even listening to the public radio. They say is the time of the buttons, and buttons are made to be touched and go very fast. So we are living this phase. So we don't see face to face, which is dangerous too, because I'm not reading everything. The words sometimes are misleading. So the intonation, some of those things sometimes doesn't appear in the written message, right? Plus this rapidity. What do you think, where are we going to end up in this dangerous world of fake, of rapidity? Even us with honest intention, sometimes we fell into this, trap. Better be what? Silent? We're going to learn to be silent. Like Moses said, the music, the silent part makes the music too. So what is your advice,
Yeah, sometimes being silent is good. Yeah, but if we see that usually what the spirits tell us is that first we go faster in the intelligence field, and then we go, like we say, the two wings. We have the intelligence one, and then the moral one. So we were very fast in the intelligence, especially if you think about the last 10, 20 years, like all the devices that we have today, all these communications that we have, how in the past the phone was just used to call someone, and today we have the whole world in our hands. So we've been very fast in this field, but in the moral one, we are the same. So yeah, so with time we are going to understand better and to learn better how to use those tools that we have. But many times it's the same way that we've always been learning, by committing mistakes and by learning with our own mistakes and then doing it in a different way. Especially if we see these new tools that we have, we don't know how to use them because we are still learning. So that's normal that we have to commit some mistakes and to learn with that, with ours, with the ones around us. But yeah. But we have like the tools that I said, like deleting and blocking and muting some people online. And that is good because for me, for example, I especially in the politics field, many times I have some friends online as I'm a journalist. Journalists, they can be very passionate about politics. And for me, for example, last year with the elections in Brazil, the presidential elections in Brazil, it was very hard for me to watch and to read what I had in my newsfeed, in the Facebook, etc. So I muted some people for 30 days. So I had this news. It was this news. Facebook had this news option, like you could snooze someone for 30 days. So it was the perfect timing between the first voting from the Brazilian elections and the second one, because the first one was in the beginning of October, the second one in the end of October. So we have 30 days, and that I could snooze so many friends and not read anything they were writing, because it was hurting me to see some people talking bad on one extreme or on the other extreme. It wasn't being healthy for me. So sometimes if it's not healthy for me, I have this option and I do it all the time, yeah.
Well, Marcelo, thank you again for all this information. We would like to transition to something else now that our friend Marcelo will also present to us, which is our...
Is the Spirit Symposium that is happening this year on May 4th in Union City in New Jersey. Is very close to New York, to New York Airport. I think it's like 10 minutes from New York. So we are having the Spirit Symposium there. The topic this year is the awakening of the self. So we have a full day of lectures, of talks about this topic, and not only that for the adults, but we also have In the Search of the Greatest Treasure for the kids and the youth and babies. Yeah, because here is saying from 6 to 16-year-old, but actually it's from 0 to 16 and 18 actually. From 0 to 18, because the ones who are 19 can already go to the ones with the adults, with all of us. So we have these youth activities, so the whole family can go this year. And the tickets, they are available on the website, spiritysymposium.org. And Sergio is here if someone wants to have more information about the symposium. Sergio is here to give any other talk and other information as well. And we have a video here about the symposium to show you.
Symposium. Every year, we gather in a different part of the country to exchange